Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. First group of prematurely born babies are evacuated from a hospital in Gaza to Egypt for medical treatment. Advocates with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies call for urgent action to save Nigeria from the brink of famine. And former U.S. First Lady Rosalynn Carter has died at 96. We'll have a report on her life and post-White House career with her husband, former President Jimmy Carter. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in the Middle East, where an artillery shell hit the second floor of a hospital in northern Gaza, killing at least 12 people, according to the Hamas-led health ministry. Israel has repeatedly said Hamas uses civilians and hospitals as shields, a claim Hamas has denied. But Israeli critics say their siege is relentless and the Israeli aerial bombardment amounts to collective punishment of the territory's more than 2 million Palestinians after Hamas' October 7th attacks into southern Israel. Smoke was seen rising from explosions in Gaza, close to its border with Israel on Monday. Israeli officials say 1,200 people were killed and some 240 people taken hostage in Hamas' October 7th rampage. Gaza's Hamas-run government says at least 13,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war, including at least 5,000 children. The United Nations says 75% of Gaza's 2.3 million people are now homeless. The first group of prematurely born babies were evacuated from a hospital in Gaza into Egypt for medical treatment on Monday, according to video from the Egyptian government. The Palestinian Red Crescent and Egypt Al Qahira TV says the newborns had been in Al Shifa Hospital, where several other babies died amid a collapse in medical services, partly because of power cuts when fuel ran out. Video from the Egyptian government showed medical staff carefully lifting tiny babies from inside an ambulance and placing them in mobile incubators, which were then wheeled across a car park toward other ambulances. A deal between Israel and Hamas to free dozens of hostages held in Palestinian territories may be underway, according to a new report. Such a deal would likely bring at least a temporary pause to the fighting in Gaza and much-needed aid across the border. U.S. and Israeli officials say any such deal is not yet finalized. VOA's Arasha Abasadi reports.
The Washington Post reports that Israel and the U.S.-designated terror group Hamas are now close to agreement on a U.S.-brokered deal to release dozens of hostages taken by Hamas in exchange for a 5-day pause in fighting that would allow a significant boost to humanitarian aid.
We are not finished. There is not yet a deal in place, and I think it would be premature to conclude that this is inevitable, given how close we have come in the past. And I think one thing that I won't do is go through all the outstanding areas in which there are still negotiations. We don't negotiate these things in public, but it is a very high priority to try to get this done. They're making some progress, and we hope that that will be concluded soon so that these people can finally come home.
Israel's military has been conducting ongoing assaults on Gaza since Hamas brazenly attacked the country on October 7. About 1,200 people died in that attack, with what's believed to be around 240 hostages taken, many still missing.
We are hopeful that we can get a significant number of hostages freed in the coming days. I don't want to go into the details of these talks. They are obviously very sensitive. The less we go into the details, the better the chances of such a deal. But they are very serious efforts, and I'm hopeful that we can have a deal in the coming days.
In the weeks following October 7, Israeli airstrikes and ground offensives killed more than 12,000 Palestinians, most of them civilians, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry in the West Bank. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, estimates about 900,000 displaced people are sheltering in their facilities across the Gaza Strip. a number 6 times higher than their planned worst-case scenario. The World Health Organization reports Gaza's largest medical facility, the Shifa Hospital, is littered with medical and solid waste, with a mass grave holding at least 80 bodies outside. But a recent effort by the WHO and the UN successfully evacuated premature babies to a site south of the facility.
For many of them, it's just, they're thinking about how they provide for their family tomorrow. But increasingly, people are very worried about what does the future hold for them. Where are they going to live? Where are they going to get their children educated? What does the future hold? And that's the big question in the minds of Gazans right now.
The back and forth between Israel and Hamas is now in its 6th week, with only a fraction of humanitarian aid having so far reached Palestinian civilians caught in the crossfire. For them, a pause in fighting could mean the difference between death and life-saving supplies that cross the border. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
U.S. and Israeli officials say there are ongoing negotiations to help release the hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. But Israeli officials are refusing to give details due to what they say is the sensitive nature of the negotiations. VOA's Peter Clotis spoke with Elon Levy, a spokesperson for the Israeli government, who reiterated the Israeli position on the terms of any hostage release.
There will be no end to the fighting that leaves our hostages in Gaza and Hamas in power. We will not go back to 6 in the morning on October 7th. We will not go back to a world in which Hamas can decide whenever it wants to invade Israel's villages, burn whole families alive, torture children in front of their parents, mutilate parents in front of their children, to rape little girls, to abduct our grandmothers, to behead babies. We will not go back to that world. There is only one way that this war can end, and that is with the total destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities in the Gaza Strip, so that Gaza can never pose a security threat to Israel.
Hamas has denied it has targeted civilians to kill or kidnap them, but says other groups might have done that. However, several governments, including the United States and independent international news outlets, say there is ample evidence taken from Hamas fighters who were captured or killed on October 7th, confirming civilians were targeted. Meanwhile, the African Union said Monday that Israel's response to Hamas' massive attack last month is inexcusable, warning that civilian casualties would fuel further extremism. Now, for more on the Israeli-Hamas war, I'm joined live via Skype from Tel Aviv by reporter Ricky Rosen. Ricky, bring us up to speed on the latest.
So the aerial bombardments by the Israeli army in Gaza have been continuing very intensively, including more towards the center and south of Gaza, instead of just the north and the area around Shifa Hospital, which was in the previous weeks. The army has said that they are still seeking to find the Hamas fighters who fled from the north and the Shifa Hospital complex towards the south, and that's why they are expanding their operations towards the south.
And Ricky, what more can you tell us about the exchange of fire between the Hezbollah and the Israeli army at the border with Lebanon?
The Israeli army said that there have been 1,000 missiles fired by Hezbollah towards Israel up until now, and there are reports that one missile coming from Hezbollah hit an Israeli army base, although there are no confirmations of casualties right now. And the Israeli army is continuing to strike back against Hezbollah.
Well, earlier we've mentioned critics say Israeli siege and aerial bombardment is relentless in Gaza. What are you hearing? As you were coming live on air, we heard there were explosions. What more can you tell us?
Before I came on air, I'm in the Tel Aviv area, and there were rockets being shot in the whole area of Tel Aviv and the surrounding cities coming from Gaza. But that's probably, you're talking about Israeli aerial bombardment. Excuse me. It's more siren. you're talking about Israeli aerial bombardment in Gaza, and as I said, the army is trying to defend that as a strategy, a continuing strategy
All
to
right.
find and kill Hamas fighters.
Right. Ricky, we want you to be safe, so we'll catch up tomorrow. Ricky Rosen reporting live for us from Tel Aviv, Israel. Now for more in the humanitarian crisis in Israel and Gaza, I'm joined live from Chicago, Illinois by Omar Shakir, the Israel and Palestine Director at Human Rights Watch. Mr. Shakir, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me.
Now describe the toll this war has taken on both Israel and Gaza.
Absolutely. I mean, I think October 7th obviously shook Israelis to their core, seeing the deliberate killings of civilians, seeing more than 230 people taken hostage, including children, including older people, paraded in the streets. I know when I've spoken with many people who are personally affected by those events, and they are very much shaken by them. In Gaza, we are seeing unprecedented carnage and slaughter. We're talking about thousands of civilians killed, including children. We're talking about the majority of the population displaced from their homes. We're talking about entire large parts of neighborhoods reduced to rubble. We're talking about more than 4,500 children killed. We're talking about a reality in which hospitals, schools, UN facilities, refugee camps have been attacked, where nobody is safe, whether you live or die is a product of luck. And civilians have paid the price for this armed conflict, and it's rooted in decades of impunity for unlawful attacks and for Israel's apartheid against Palestinians.
So, Omar, what does Human Rights Watch recommend in respect to human rights law in the face of a war of this magnitude?
A number one recommendation has to be to respect international humanitarian law. That law grew out of the ashes of World War II and was created precisely to spare civilians from the excesses of armed conflict. And we're seeing those very principles put to the test. And frankly, we're seeing them disregarded by all parties. Atrocities committed by one group does not give license to the other group to commit atrocities. International humanitarian law is not a deal between fighters. It's a deal with humanity. So what we're calling for is for all parties to respect international humanitarian law, meaning to refrain from unlawful attacks, including disproportionate, indiscriminate attacks. We are calling for an end to collective punishment, cutting water, electricity, medicine, food for the entire civilian population of Gaza is a war crime. There needs to be clear condemnation of war crimes. There must be a restoration of aid and basic services. Those are all about immediate civilian protection, but in the long run, to prevent continuing to see the carnage and bloodshed and slaughter, there needs to be accountability for serious abuses, including at the International Criminal Court. There must be an addressing of root causes, including impunity and apartheid, and there must be an end to all forms of complicity by states in serious abuses, including arms sales and military assistance. There must be an arms embargo on Israel.
Omar, what else did Human Rights Watch unearth in both Israel and Gaza that may not be as widely reported by the media outlets that you can share with us?
Look, I think the situation, the humanitarian situation, it gets focused. I mean, we know your segment covered the babies that were evacuated, but I think folks forget that the majority of hospitals in Gaza are no longer in operation. And while there's been a focus rightfully on attacks on hospitals, and Human Rights Watch has found that the Israeli government has committed unlawful airstrikes, there's also a reality in which we're not seeing medicine get in. So life-saving care is not able to be provided. So people are dying, dialysis patients and others, because they're not able to get clean water. We're already seeing reports of thousands of cases of acute respiratory illness and diarrhea. Overcrowding is creating the risk of all sorts of different disease. Hunger, the bakeries aren't operating. In Gaza, they've been bombed. They also haven't been receiving supplies. So there's a real risk of malnutrition and starvation. And then we have to remember also the hostages that are being held who face the same conditions as the rest of the Gaza population. They're also at risk because of bombardment. They're also at risk because of the blockade. They should be civilian hostages should be immediately unconditionally released. But I think it's important that we, keep in mind we're 6 weeks in. That means 6 weeks of cuts to basic services and aid, 6 weeks the hostages have been away from their family, 6 weeks that Gaza has been under constant bombardment, demolition of all sorts of structures. So I think there really is an urgent crisis, and there must be urgent action to prevent further mass atrocities.
Omar, many thanks for what you've done out there, your research and your insight into this. Omar Shakir is the Israel and Palestine Director at Human Rights Watch.
Thank you.
Now to West Africa. In Nigeria, advocates with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies are calling for urgent action to save the country from the brink of famine. The UN reports that over 15% of the population is currently undernourished, and that number is rising. Gibson Emeka has this story from Abuja, Nigeria, narrated by Carol Van Dam.
Less food, more water. That's how 41-year-old Ruth David recounts the acute food shortage faced by her household and how they are coping. Life's been hard since the mother of three fled with her family to Abuja, Nigeria's capital city, after a deadly Boko Haram attack on their village in Borno State, northeast Nigeria.
But you will not eat that you will satisfy.
We don't eat to satisfy our hunger. We just manage. We cook small, add a lot of water to it, the children will sleep, and we know we have survived that day until the next day.
That is the way we manage the food.
After over a decade of living in a camp for internally displaced persons, or IDPs, David still relies on food donations to feed her children. David says things are worse now as food donations to the IDP camp from humanitarian organizations have dwindled due to the tough economic situation in Nigeria.
But now, they are not coming
Now they are not coming. It takes like 6 months. We don't share food at our store. They are not coming with food again.
They are not coming with food again.
As of September this year, there were an estimated 24.8 million food insecure people like David countrywide, according to the UN. This year, the Global Hunger Index, a European charity tracking hunger globally, found that Nigeria ranks 109 out of 125 countries. The index's parameters assessed undernourishment, child stunting, wasting, and mortality. Climate devastations, inflation, and insecurity are the major drivers of food insecurity in Nigeria. Hopewell Munyare, operation manager at the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, says recent global conflicts and disasters are adding to the lack of response to the needs in the country.
Our efforts will always be, competing with other interests. For instance, we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which has its own impacts on Nigeria and the rest of Africa in terms of food insecurity. There's a critical issue around that. We have now the Israeli-Pakistani war, which is also happening. We have situations of like the Syria-Turkey earthquake that happened. So in those areas, those immediate or urgent disasters where resources usually would tend to quickly go also affects our resource mobilization.
The Nigerian government declared a state of emergency for food insecurity in July 2023. Humanitarian agencies have continued to scale up health and nutrition interventions to the most vulnerable communities. Humanitarian advocates like Munyari are urging the government and stakeholders to map out long-term strategies to attain food security and halt the hunger crisis. For Gibson Emeka in Abuja, Nigeria, I'm Carol Van Dam, VOA News.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Nigerian radio sports broadcast is taking a unique approach to its programming. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain, and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, Madagascar's incumbent president, Andry Rajoelina, appears to be on the doorstep of securing a third term in an election marked by low turnout and an opposition boycott. Latest results shared by the Election Commission shows Rajoelina, 49, had garnered nearly 63% of the vote from a turnout of just 43%. Incumbent president and football legend George Weah has conceded defeat in Liberia's tight runoff race. Opposition leader Joseph Boakai is the new president-elect. The latest and nearly complete results from Saturday's shows Boakai leading with nearly 51% of the votes. Liberia, Africa's oldest republic, was founded by freed American slaves. And the Democratic Republic of Congo on Sunday launched a month-long election campaign with 25 candidates running for president amid a tense political climate and relentless fighting in the east of the country. 44 million people are registered to vote out of a population of almost 100 million. President Felix Tshisekedi is seeking a second term. Former U.S. First Lady Rosalynn Carter has died at age of 96. VOA's Ken Faribault, who extensively covered Rosalynn Carter's life and post-White House career, promoting global health and democracy with her husband, former President Jimmy Carter, has more.
Eleanor Rosalynn Smith Carter was born in Plains, Georgia on August 18, 1927. She grew up familiar with the son of a local peanut farmer, James Earl Carter, Jr., better known as Jimmy.
I was 13, his little sister's friend. I never ever dreamed I'd go with him.
They married in Plains on July 7, 1946, and gave birth to 3 sons, John Jack Carter, James Earl Carter III, or Chip, and Jeff. Daughter Amy was born later in 1967. The family returned to Plains in 1953 to take over the Carter peanut farming business.
But he got up one morning, and I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to see who's going to run for the state senate."
Carter won, launching his political career that eventually carried them into Georgia's governor's mansion in 1971 and the White House in 1977. President Carter encouraged his wife's prominent role in his administration. As First Lady of the United States, Carter used her platform to advocate for mental health. The hostage crisis in Iran contributed to her husband's presidential election defeat in 1980, and the couple returned to Plains, Georgia in 1981 to plan their post-presidential life.
He said we can have a place kind of like Camp David where we can negotiate a peace agreement. So that was the germ of the idea for the Carter Center.
The Carter Center has monitored more than 100 elections and treated millions of people suffering neglected tropical diseases. Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter are the longest married presidential couple in U.S. history. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Plains, Georgia.
A local sports broadcast on Splash FM in Ibadan, Nigeria is taking a unique approach to its programming in an English language dominated space. Jordan Smith has more.
Adaronke Adeshola is a 25-year-old sports commentator. She hosts a show called Jawansi, which means let them know. But in a space dominated by English sports programming, Adeshola's radio program, which has over 3 million listeners, is unique because she broadcasts in Yoruba.
Some people don't understand what the commentator is saying in English. Some commentators do come with proverbs, poems, and not everybody understands that. But as a Yoruba commentator, my show comes to fill the gap where people are lacking, like what they don't understand. They know if you tune into a Yoruba commentary, they will understand the game even more, what is going on, without even watching. When they listen, they know that, okay, this is what is going on. The pass is here, the ball is in the net, the ball is at the back of the net, this is a goal kick, this is a free kick, in their own indigenous language and the language they understand.
Adeshola's use of the local language, Ibadan, her humorous banter, and her wordplay is a breath of fresh air for many. Chinujolo-san is a furniture maker who listens to her morning show on his way to work.
I understand and speak English, but her program makes me understand soccer games better. She infuses some excitement into her analysis and makes fun of any team that is losing, whether Arsenal, Chelsea, or Barca. She does not support anyone. Arsenal is my team, and the other day we beat Man City. Her analysis made me happy.
Soccer fan Suru Olayande says people were uninterested listening to the sport in English, but a show in Yoruba engages more people.
For those who don't understand the sport before, when they began to hear soccer analysis in Yoruba, they were very happy. Before, when the commentary was in English, only a few listened. But now everyone is interested.
Adeshola preps for her show by watching the games and researching online. She says the reason her show stands out is because radio is such a male-dominated space, which makes her shine as a female broadcaster.
So that alone is an attraction to people that, wow, a lady reporting Yoruba sports, that's huge.
When not in the studio, Adeshola is studying for her degree in mass communications, with her main goal being expanding sports in Yoruba globally. For VOA, I'm Jordan Smith in Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in